I do like to think as templates as basically opening the door to creativity versus, stifling their creativity, because sometimes if you ask a student to create something from scratch, they get overwhelmed and then they quit the process, and we don't want that.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. This week's episode is titled Tips for Using Templates with Students with Eve Heaton. I saw Eve sharing on social media about some great use cases for templates, a topic I love to talk about. If you've joined me for an episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast in the past, you know I love sharing tips that can save us all some time, and templates definitely fall into this category. So I invited Eve to join me for the podcast today to share some strategies and ideas for educators. She had oodles of great advice to share. Let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Eve. I am so excited to chat with you today about tips for using templates with students. So before we get into all of that, would love for you to share a bit with listeners about your role in education. What does your day-to-day look like?
Okay, so I'm an educational technology coach with the Beaufort County School District, and that's in South Carolina. And I work with a team of 7 technology coaches serving 33 schools with over 21,000 students. We work on a dispatch model, which means we go where there are requests rather than being assigned to specific schools. So the requests may be for one-to-one assistance, school-wide training, grade level support, co-planning, co-teaching, supporting our school-based techs, working with our new teachers, and just anything you can imagine. And it's kind of nice because you get to experience and assist outside of being assigned to one school or a cluster.
Yeah. And I bet just, as you're talking there, I can imagine that model must be, very different than going someplace where maybe someone's like hesitant to work with you or isn't sure that this is the right use of their time for the day, but instead is probably excited to see you because they have, a problem they're working through, or they're just enthusiastic, right, about the topic they've asked you to come to. So that's awesome. And thanks for sharing that model, because I don't think that it's as widespread, right? Particularly for coaching and support and just pushing in or, helping someone, problem solve, throughout their day. So One thing that caught my attention with your work, right, is this idea of making things a bit easier for educators, which aligns so much with, my mission with the blog and the podcast. So when I reached out to you, it was really under this umbrella of templates. And today we're talking about templates, something I love. When we scheduled this podcast, I used a template for making sure we could get a date on the calendar, right? And a follow-up template of an email. So I'm big on templates. So what exactly is a template, and why are templates such a valuable tool for educators and students?
All right. Well, for templates, they're like a pre-designed format or structure that is a starting point for creating things like documents, like you said, presentations, projects, or other types of content. And it can include like placeholders for text, images, and other elements, which allows users to fill in their own content within a consistent framework. And for me, templates, well, all the educators that I work with, and most educators who use templates, it's such a valuable time-saving tool. So instead of starting from scratch or building something from scratch, it just basically streamlines the planning and execution of a project where the focus is more on formatting and more on the teaching and the learning.
Yeah. And, when I use templates, I always think like there's still ways to personalize it. There's still ways to make it perfect for this one situation. It doesn't have to be like a completely canned response, right? Or something impersonal. But if I can save some time, right, I can then have the energy, right, to personalize something as opposed to just like doing a brain dump in an email or using, a graphic organizer that's missing some pieces because I'm in a rush, right, as I'm prepping for, working with the group. So I love that you emphasize that piece. And there might be things that listeners use that fall into that template category that they wouldn't call it either, right, like an email, or something. So appreciate that. As we're unpacking what it means to design templates, what are some key considerations when designing templates to make sure that they really are going to be easy to use for students?
Oh, absolutely. When I'm designing a template, I usually think of the educational content. What do I want the students to put in this template? So that helps me to design it. So for example, if I need them to include a picture, I need to give them a space for a picture. Is the text going to be a paragraph, or is it going to be split up in boxes? So once I sort of have that in my head, I can start designing my template to match what I want the outcome to be.
I love leading with the outcome there, especially if it's something that you're designing with one particular group in mind, and maybe you're going to revisit that. So, with students, right, that's one thing, right? You might know the group, but I'm sure with you bouncing around to lots of different places, right? How do you think about designing templates when you might not know the group as well, or maybe something other teachers might use?
The first thing I always consider is making it editable or being able to modify it, because something that might work in my head may not work for a teacher, but elements of it might work. Mm-hmm. So I do run into this like frequently, like with like teacher pay teachers. I often get templates off that I wish that I could modify just slightly for my group, and it's often difficult. So to me, that's one of the main things. Make sure it's editable.
Yeah, and I always think about like how my brain works a certain way, right? Like I think in tables as opposed to bullet points, right? Like, or I like things organized in one way or another. And so that might not resonate with everyone else, right? And having some different formats, maybe they want lines to fill in as opposed to an empty box or empty space, or they want to put in a sentence starter for students to differentiate that. So, that's the kind of thing that I think is helpful for someone who might make something that's collaborative or for a team, right, that they're going to share. So, speaking of modifications, how do you modify templates for students with different learning needs or accommodations?
Well, like you said, sometimes it's as easy as like putting in a sentence starter, or it could be to reduce the criteria or like enlarge the font. But the biggest thing that I always say when you're modifying a template is to keep the style the same, visually the same. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to put it out in a hallway or you're walking around in a classroom, it feels like everybody's on the same project.
Mm-hmm. That's such a great tip because you don't want someone to feel like their thing is different or just for them and maybe a way that doesn't help build their confidence right around what they're doing. So I love that idea that we're keeping things looking right very visually the same so that everyone knows that they're working together, right? Even if their supports or their scaffolds, right, in that template might be, just a little bit different. And, that's something that might seem small on the surface, but could make a big difference for a student to feel included, within a group. Now, some educators might worry that templates limit creativity. I know creativity is something you and I think about a lot, but how can templates actually support and enhance student creativity? Do you have any strategies for making sure that there's some flexibility within a structured template?
Absolutely. The structure, usually they can change the font, they can change the color, they have free reign on the images they choose or their video elements or their sound elements. And I do like to think as templates as basically opening the door to creativity versus, stifling their creativity, because sometimes if you ask a student to create something from scratch, they get overwhelmed and then they quit the process, and we don't want that. So we basically want them to try and continue on their own. So basically those templates act as foundational knowledge for creating in the future.
I love that idea of opening the door to creativity because I don't know about you, all right, but you probably have also been in a situation where you look at a blank page and you just have that, maybe not a full panic, but where do I even start, right?
Absolutely.
Or that's going to carve out, how many minutes to just get over that hump to say, how do I want this organized? How do I want this to look? Well, if I can get a little bit of support with that, particularly, right, if we're bringing students into a space where we're leaning more into the content, that's the part that's the most important for us, right? If we can give them some structure and make sure that they know that it's, safe for them to change the font colors, to change, the font itself, to maybe move an element from one side of the page to the other, right? Sometimes we make the assumption that they're going to do that, but they also need that reminder that it's okay. This is here for you to make your own in whatever way, right, that looks for your group. So do you have any favorite tools or platforms for creating and sharing templates with students?
There's actually quite a lot out there, but I have been leaning towards Adobe Express, which is such a phenomenal tool, primarily because it is free for all educators. So there's no cost. So that always gets 2 thumbs up for me. And we are able to roster it through our ClassLink or Clever, so all of our students and all of our teachers in our district have a single sign-on for that platform. And it has every kind of creativity tool you could want. So graphics, videos, web pages, animations. It's very easy to use. It has a lot of educational templates, so I don't have to start from scratch, which is wonderful. And they're searchable by grade. They're searchable by subject. And those templates are easy to push out into classrooms because they had a classroom feature where you literally could just push it out to the students and you get to see what they're working on at the same time.
Yeah. And I'm a super fan of all things Adobe too, right? I've done some work with their team and just love all of that. And I've been really impressed with the ease of their, remixable templates. Just this opportunity to maybe find a template that's pre-made and then you can just send it off to a group. Or, and I find myself probably a little bit more, maybe 70-30, a little bit more in this category. I'm going to take that template, make a couple changes to it, and then, right, take that next step, right, of sending it out to a group. So yeah, I love the ease with that. Even, Book Creators got a whole bunch of templates built in. And just yesterday, I was working with a group of educators in Alabama, and we were looking at Padlet and some of their templates too. So sometimes tools that we don't always think of as having templates might be a little sneaky, right? They might not lead with that, right, as the thing that they are sharing is best about their tool or resource, but it might just be there. If you poke around a little bit within a favorite tool, you might see some templates that are ready to run with and ready to use. So, we talked about making our lives, making teachers, making educators' lives a bit easier, right, with using templates. How can teachers save time by reusing and adapting templates across different lessons or even different school years? Do you have any advice for organizing templates to make sure they're easy to find in the next unit or the next season?
Yeah, so for me, if I'm making a template from scratch, I always feel like that upfront work will save you a lot of time in the future. So I can reuse those templates year after year. And a lot of the programs, so I know Adobe Express I just spoke about, offers you the ability to save your work into folders.
Yeah.
Which makes things so much easier to find. Some programs don't have that ability. So in the past, I've copied the link to the template and put it in my lesson plan or my curriculum maps. So they follow me year after year.
Yeah, that's such a great idea, right? So first, trying to lean into what the tool has. Some of them have folders, or some of them have like really easy search terms. So as long as you name something well, you can find it later, right? Or maybe having it in your lesson plans, right? Again, some sort of system you have to make it easy to search. One thing that I've shared with groups that are kind of easier said than done when things are busy, like you almost need to have that like hard time on the calendar or like this commitment that it's always going to be the first 10 minutes of a faculty meeting or team meeting every month is just to say, let's like dump all of our favorite stuff from this month, right, in this document. And maybe it's just for you, right? Maybe it's for your team, right? Coming together to say, like, let's put, some Taylor Swift and 10 minutes on the clock. And let's just like let someone choose different music every month, maybe, but then put all of our links into a document and make it really easy to find everything next October or next February or next April. So I love that idea of leaning into folders, like you said, Eve, right? Or having that, connection to your favorite lesson plan. So, if there's someone listening who's trying this out, maybe for the first time, like they've come across templates in a favorite tool and they don't know exactly what to do, or they love the idea of this for saving time. What's one tip you give to a teacher who's new to using templates with students?
I always say try it out first, because that not only gives you an exemplar to show students, which is always a good thing, and it allows you to sort of troubleshoot or sort of guess where the hiccups might come in when you roll this out to students. The second tip, I know you only said one, but my second tip is if the program allows it. So I know I was talking about Adobe, but it allows you to duplicate the page. So I give students page 1, but on page 2, I have the same template. So if a student accidentally deletes something and they've gone too far ahead to undo, I could pop over to page 2, copy the element that they've accidentally deleted, and put it back in the page they're working on. And that is a lot.
Yeah. That's such a great troubleshooting tip. I feel like I've done it where I've given like 2 pages, but one is the exemplar, right? Like, so they've got that right there. But I love having like 2 blank versions. So if they are moving things around, if they are changing a whole bunch of colors and then things get like lost in the layering of content, they know exactly where to go. So that's such a great idea. And I think for someone who is trying this for the first time, like you were talking about, and maybe they're building their own confidence, right? And rolling out a creative activity with a group, that can definitely help with any potential, classroom management issues too, of like oh no, or I can't find this, or where is it? So that's fantastic. Well, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work and just follow along with the things that you're sharing?
Yeah, I'm on actually most social media channels. So my hashtag my handle is @ATechCoachLife. That's where I can be reached. TikTok, Instagram, X.
Perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. And so for anyone listening right now who's on the go, you can do the mental bookmark to find Eve there. And I'll put links out so that you can follow along and make sure that you are learning all sorts of new tips for making things a little bit easier this school year. Thank you so much for your time today, Eve.
Thank you.
It was so much fun chatting with Eve today, and I'll make sure to link out to some resources related to templates that I think you'll enjoy in the show notes. So let's make this EdTech easy with a few key points from today's episode. Templates save educators time by providing a consistent structure. Design templates with editable elements to make sure they're flexible for different classroom needs. Templates act as a foundation for creativity by reducing overwhelm and encouraging kids to explore content and design freely. Many tools offer free, searchable, and remixable templates. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from this episode, including all of the ways to connect with Eve, by heading to classtechtips.com/podcast and finding today's episode. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.